Cole Harper had just enough time to grab the safety bar above his seat before the Farpoint Accord hit the upper atmosphere of Veldara and began to shake like a tin box in a storm. Alarms were screaming from every corner of the ship. Red light filled the cabin. The smell of burned wiring moved through the air like smoke before a fire. "Hold on to something!" Dana Reeves shouted from the front of the cabin, her voice cutting through the noise. She was gripping the co-pilot console with both hands, her knuckles pale, her eyes fixed on the viewport where the planet was rushing up toward them. Cole held on. He was not a pilot. He was not an engineer. He was a field operations crew member, which meant his job was usually to go out onto whatever planet they landed on and make sure things went smoothly on the ground. Right now, there was nothing smooth about anything. The ship was tilting hard to the left. One of the rear thrusters had gone completely dark, and the reactor in the lower hull was making a deep, grinding sound that no reactor was ever supposed to make. "Reactor 2 is destabilizing," someone called out from across the cabin. It was Owen, the ship's systems monitor, a thin young man with glasses that had already flown off his face and were hanging from one ear. "We have maybe 4 minutes before it vents." 4 minutes to put this thing down," Dana said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Cole looked out the small side window beside his seat. Below them, the planet of Veldara was spreading out in dark greens and deep reds. It was a volcanic world, full of jagged mountain ranges, wide, flat valleys of dark stone, and rivers of slow-moving lava that glowed orange even from high above. It was not a welcoming-looking place. It was the kind of planet that looked like it had never asked for visitors and was not planning to start now. But that was not why they were here. They were here because the Galactic Diplomatic Council had sent the Farpoint Accord to make contact with the Veldaran people, a species of large, intelligent, scaled beings who had lived on this planet for thousands of years. The Veldarans had refused contact with almost every species that had approached them. They had their own reasons, and nobody outside their world fully understood those reasons. But the Council kept trying, and this crew had been the next attempt. The crash was not part of the plan. The ship hit the ground with a sound that Cole felt more in his chest than heard with his ears. It was a long, scraping, tearing sound as the hull dragged across dark rock and volcanic soil. Sparks flew past the windows. Something in the ceiling of the cabin snapped loose and swung down, and Cole threw his arm up just in time to block it from hitting his face. The ship slid for what felt like a very long time before it finally stopped. Silence came suddenly, the way silence always does after a very loud thing. Cole sat still for a moment. He checked his arms, his legs, his ribs. Everything hurt, but nothing was broken. Around him, the rest of the crew was doing the same thing. Slowly sitting up, touching their own faces, looking around with wide, blinking eyes. "Everyone out," Dana said, standing up. Her voice was calm. That was one thing Cole had always respected about her. In bad moments, she got quieter, not louder. "We have to get clear before that reactor vents. Move!" They moved. The exit ramp had bent slightly in the crash, but it opened enough for them to squeeze through. One by one, the crew of the Farpoint Accord stepped out onto the surface of Veldara for the first time. The air was warm and carried a faint sulfur smell, the kind that sits at the back of the throat. The sky above was a dull orange, lit by a sun that seemed to hang lower here than anywhere Cole had been before. And then he saw them. They were already there. Along the ridge of rock to the left, standing completely still, were the Veldarans. There were at least 20 of them that Cole could count, though there were likely more in the shadows behind. They were large, much larger than he had expected from the briefing images. Their scales were dark, somewhere between deep green and black, and caught the light of the orange sky in a way that made them look like they had been carved from the planet itself. Their eyes were amber, sharp, and absolutely unblinking. None of them moved. None of them made a sound. The humans stopped walking and stood in a loose group near the ramp, looking back at the Veldarans. Nobody spoke. The two groups simply looked at each other across the stretch of dark volcanic rock between them. Cole felt the weight of the moment the way you feel a storm coming before a single drop of rain falls. "Don't move suddenly," Dana said very quietly through the side of her mouth. "Don't reach for anything. Just stand still." Cole nodded once and kept his eyes forward. That was when he noticed the small shape near the wreckage. It was down at the base of the ship's crumpled rear section, where the reactor housing was making that deep grinding sound again. A hatchling. Small, maybe the size of a large dog, with scales that were still soft-looking and not yet fully dark. It had wandered out from somewhere in the rocks and was poking its small nose at the side of the hull, curious the way young things are always curious about things they should not touch. And Cole knew that sound the reactor was making. He had heard it once before, in a training simulation. It was the sound a reactor made about 30 seconds before it vented a burst of superheated pressure outward in every direction. The hatchling had no idea. Cole's legs were already moving before his mind had finished the thought. He did not shout. He did not wave his arms. He just ran, straight toward the rear of the ship where the hatchling was pressing its small nose against the crumpled hull. The volcanic rock under his boots was uneven and sharp, and he nearly lost his balance twice in the first few seconds, but he kept going. Behind him, he heard Dana say his name. Just once, sharp and low, the way she said things when she was alarmed but trying not to cause a bigger problem. He did not stop. The hatchling heard him coming and turned its head. Its amber eyes were wide and bright, catching the orange light of the sky. It looked at Cole the way young creatures look at unfamiliar things, not yet afraid, just curious, tilting its head slightly to one side as if trying to understand what this strange, two-legged being was doing running toward it at full speed. Cole did not slow down. He covered the last few meters in a hard sprint, dropped to his knees on the rough rock, and threw himself forward over the hatchling, pressing it down and curling his body around it as tightly as he could. The hatchling made a short, startled sound beneath him, something between a chirp and a growl, and pushed against his chest with its front feet. Its scales were rough even through Cole's uniform. "Stay down," Cole said, though he knew it could not understand him. He said it anyway. The reactor vented. The blast came from the rear housing of the ship with a sound like the world cracking open. A wave of superheated pressure rolled outward in all directions, carrying heat and force and fragments of torn metal with it. It hit Cole across the back and arms like a wall of fire. His emergency thermal layer absorbed some of it, but not all. The heat got through on his left forearm and across his upper back, and the pain arrived immediately, sharp and total, the kind of pain that shuts out everything else for a moment. He was thrown forward. His grip on the hatchling held. They skidded across the dark rock together, Cole's body still wrapped around the small dragon, taking the scrape of the ground on his knees and elbows. When they stopped sliding, Cole lay still for a second, breathing hard through his teeth, his eyes shut, waiting to find out how badly he was hurt. The hatchling was moving beneath him. It pushed against his chest again, more insistently this time, and made a low sound that was not quite a growl. Cole loosened his grip and let it pull back slightly. It looked up at him from a distance of about 30 centimeters, its amber eyes moving across his face slowly, as if it was reading something written there. Its small nostrils opened and closed. It was checking him, Cole realized. It was trying to understand what had just happened. "I'm all right," Cole told it quietly. "Mostly." That was not entirely true. His left arm was burned and already starting to swell under the sleeve. His back felt like someone had pressed a hot iron across it. When he tried to push himself up to a sitting position, his arms shook with the effort. The hatchling did not run. It stayed exactly where it was, close to Cole's side, watching him. And then Cole became aware of a sound, or rather the absence of one. Everything had gone completely quiet. He looked up. The Veldaran clan, all 20 or more of them, had not moved from the ridge. But something about them was different now. The posture, the angle of their heads, the way their amber eyes were all pointed in the same direction. They were looking at Cole with an expression he could not name because he had never seen it on a Veldaran face before. It was not anger. It was not the cold suspicion from a few minutes ago. It was something else entirely, something that sat in the stillness of them like a held breath. Dana and the rest of the crew reached Cole a moment later, moving fast across the rock. Owen got there first and dropped down beside him, pulling a field medical kit from his belt. "Burns," Owen said, already opening the kit. "Arm and back. How bad does it feel?" "Bad enough," Cole said. "Can you move everything?" Cole flexed his fingers, turned his neck, shifted his legs. "Yes." "Okay, hold still." Owen applied a cooling compress to Cole's forearm and began cutting away the burned section of his sleeve. Dana stood just behind them, facing the ridge, keeping her eyes on the Veldarans. She was very still, the way she got when she was thinking hard about something. The hatchling had not moved. It was sitting beside Cole's knee, its tail wrapped around its own feet, watching Owen work with the same careful attention it had given Cole a moment ago. Then a sound came from the ridge. It was a single low rumble, deep and steady, like something vibrating far underground. It came from the largest of the Veldarans, the one who stood slightly ahead of the others, the one with darker scales and a wider frame, and the kind of stillness that came not from fear, but from authority. This one had been watching everything from the moment the humans had climbed out of the wreckage, and it had not shifted position once. It rumbled again, and then it did something unexpected. It turned. Without a word, without a gesture toward the humans, without any visible signal to the rest of the clan, the large Veldaran simply turned and walked back along the ridge. And one by one, the others followed. They moved in silence, their heavy steps making almost no sound on the volcanic rock, until the ridge was empty and the humans were alone again beside the broken ship. Dana let out a slow breath. "What just happened?" Owen asked, not looking up from Cole's arm. "I don't know," Dana said, "but they left without doing anything to us. After everything that just happened, they just left." Cole looked at the empty ridge. The hatchling beside his knee made a small sound, low and soft, and pressed the side of its head gently against Cole's good arm. And then Cole felt the exhaustion arrive all at once, the way it does after the body has run on fear and speed and has nothing left to give. His vision went soft at the edges. The orange sky above him seemed very far away. "Dana," he said. "I see you," she said immediately, stepping forward. "Owen, he's going under." I know, just keep him upright." Cole did not hear the rest of it. The orange sky faded, and then there was nothing. When something came back, it was not the sky. It was stone. Smooth, dark stone above him, lit by a faint amber glow from somewhere he could not see. The air was warmer here, and carried that faint sulfur smell mixed with something older, something mineral and deep, like the inside of a mountain. Cole turned his head slowly. He was not on the ship. He was not near the wreckage. He was inside a cave, lying on a flat shelf of smooth rock, and on every side of him, sitting in the amber-lit dark, were the Veldarans. That was the first and most important decision his brain made in the few seconds after his eyes opened. Do not move. Do not make a sound. Just look and understand where you are before you do anything else. He was lying on a flat shelf of dark stone that had been smoothed down over what must have been many years, worn to a surface that was almost soft compared to the rough volcanic rock outside. The cave around him was large, much larger than it had seemed at first. The ceiling rose high above, disappearing into shadow. The walls curved inward on both sides in a way that felt deliberate, shaped not by accident but by time and use. Amber light came from clusters of a glowing mineral embedded in the rock at various points along the walls, giving everything a warm, deep color that reminded Cole of late evening light back home. And the Veldarans were everywhere, not crowded, not pressing in. They were simply present, sitting or standing at various points around the cave, some near the walls, some further back in the shadows. Their amber eyes caught the mineral light and held it, so that even the ones sitting furthest back were visible as pairs of steady, glowing points in the dark. None of them were making any sound. None of them were moving. They were watching him. Cole took a slow breath and let it out carefully. His back still hurt. His arm still hurt. But the pain was different now, duller, more distant, the sharp edge of it gone. He looked down at his left forearm and found it wrapped in something he did not recognize. It was not anything from the ship's medical kit. It was a thick paste, dark gray in color, applied in an even layer over the burned skin and left to dry slightly at the edges. It smelled faintly of minerals and something else, something cool and clean. Whatever it was working. The swelling had gone down. The skin beneath, where he could see it at the edges of the dressing, looked calmer than it should have after a burn that size. He became aware of something warm against his right side. He looked down slowly. The hatchling was there. It was curled up against him, its small body pressed to his ribs, its head resting on its front feet, its eyes half open in the way of a creature that is not quite asleep, but is completely relaxed. Its scales rose and fell with steady breathing. It had not left him. From the look of it, it had not moved from his side since they had been brought here. Cole looked at it for a moment, then he looked back up at the cave. One of the Veldarans near the entrance shifted its weight, and Cole's eyes moved to it automatically. This one was smaller than the large one from the ridge, younger, with scales that were a slightly lighter shade, not yet fully darkened. It was watching Cole with a different kind of attention than the others. Less like a guard and more like someone studying a problem they found genuinely interesting. Cole met its eyes and held them for a moment. Then he looked away, slowly, deliberately. Not in fear, just in the way that someone looks away when they want to show they are not a threat. He had read everything the council briefing had given them about Veldaran behavior before this mission. Most of it had been incomplete because almost no outsider had spent real time with them. But there were a few things that every observer agreed on. The Veldarans placed enormous value on silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of choice. Speaking too quickly, filling quiet with noise, was understood among them as a sign of weakness or dishonesty. A being who could not be still was a being who could not be trusted. Cole decided he could be still. He lay on the stone shelf, and he did not speak, and he did not fidget, and he did not look around with the wide, anxious eyes of someone who was afraid. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at the mineral light in the walls. He listened to the hatchling breathing beside him. Time passed. He was not sure how much. Then he heard footsteps, heavy and measured, coming from deeper in the cave. The large one came in from a passage on the far side of the cave that Cole had not noticed before. The clan elder, because that was what this one clearly was, moved through the space with the kind of ease that came from owning a place completely. The other Veldarans shifted slightly as it passed, not in fear, but in acknowledgement, the way people shift when someone important enters a room. The elder stopped a few meters from Cole's stone shelf and looked at him. Cole looked back. Neither of them spoke. The elder's eyes moved slowly across Cole, taking in the wrapped arm, the burned patches on his uniform, the way he was lying still, the hatchling pressed against his side. It was a thorough look, the kind that missed nothing. Cole had the feeling that whatever this elder was deciding about him, it was being decided carefully. Cole did not look away, but he kept his expression soft. No challenge in it, no fear either, just calm, open attention. The elder held his gaze for what felt like a long time. Then it turned and walked back toward the deeper passage, unhurried, without any visible reaction. Cole let out a slow breath. Then he heard other footsteps, lighter ones, coming from the cave entrance. Dana came in, followed by Owen and two other crew members. They were unharmed, clearly watched by two younger Veldarans who walked just behind them, but they were walking freely, not being pushed or guided by force. Dana's eyes found Cole immediately, and she crossed the cave to him in a few quick steps, dropping to one knee beside the stone shelf. "You're awake," she said, and the relief in her voice was real. "How long?" Cole asked. "About 6 hours. They brought us in about an hour after you. Nobody has touched us. Nobody has threatened us. They just... watch." She glanced at the Veldarans around the cave. The younger ones keep getting closer, a little at a time. Cole looked over her shoulder. She was right. The younger Veldarans had moved in slightly since Donna had entered, their curiosity clearly stronger than whatever caution was holding them back. "That's a good sign," Cole said quietly. "Is it?" "Yes. Curious means they're still deciding. Decided would look different." Dana looked at him for a moment. "You read the briefing materials more carefully than I did." "I had a long flight." She almost smiled. Then her eyes dropped to the hatchling still pressed against Cole's side. "It hasn't moved since they put you down." One of the elders came and looked at it twice. The second time, it made that low, rumbling sound and then left again. Cole looked at the hatchling. It had opened its eyes at the sound of voices and was now watching Dana with the same half-curious, half-measuring look it had given Cole when he first ran toward it. "They gave it a name," Dana said. "Or something like a name. Owen saw the ceremony. They placed a small stone in front of it about 2 hours ago. Apparently surviving a significant event earns you a name among them." Cole looked at the hatchling again. It looked back at him. Then Cole noticed something on the ground near the base of the stone shelf. He had not seen it before because it was small and sat in the shadow at the edge of the amber light. A single stone, no larger than his fist, carved with a pattern of lines that crossed and looped around each other in a shape that felt deliberate and specific. It was not near the hatchling. It was on Cole's side of the shelf. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked up at the cave, at the pairs of amber eyes watching him from the warm dark. "Dana," he said. "Yes." "That stone by the shelf. Don't touch it. Don't move it. Just let it sit there." She looked at it. "What is it?" "I'm not sure yet," Cole said, "but I think it means something important." The stone sat there all night. Cole watched it through the long, quiet hours while the cave settled into a deeper stillness around him. The amber light from the mineral clusters in the walls never changed, never dimmed, never brightened. It just held steady, warm and even, as if the cave itself was breathing at a pace that had nothing to do with urgency. The Veldarans around the edges of the space shifted occasionally, some moving back into the deeper passages, others coming forward to take their place. But the watching never stopped. Cole did not touch the stone. He did not point at it or speak about it again. He just let it be where it was and tried to sleep when his body asked him to, which it did, several times, because the burns on his back and arm were still pulling energy out of him the way injuries always do. The hatchling stayed beside him through all of it. By the time the cave's air changed slightly and the distant sound of wind outside told Cole that morning had arrived on Veldara, he felt clearer. Not fully well, but clear enough. He sat up slowly on the stone shelf, moving carefully so as not to pull at the dressing on his arm, and looked around the cave. There were fewer Veldarans now. Only 6 remained visible, including the younger one with the lighter scales, who had been watching Cole with that particular expression of focused curiosity since the beginning. This one was closer than it had been the night before. It had moved in gradually during the hours Cole had been drifting in and out of sleep, step by careful step, until now it was sitting only a few meters away. Cole looked at it. It looked at Cole. Then, in a way that surprised Cole completely, it spoke. The words were Veldaran, deep and layered in the way their language apparently was, but mixed in with them were sounds that were almost recognizable, almost human. Broken and imperfect, but deliberate. The young Veldaran had clearly been listening to the crew speak to each other across the hours, and had been doing something with what it heard. It said something that sounded roughly like a question. Cole looked at Dana, who had been sitting against the cave wall nearby, awake and watching. She raised her eyebrows. Owen beside her was already pulling out his translation pad, the small handheld device that held the limited Veldaran language data the Council had been able to collect from old recordings. "Give it to me," Cole said quietly, reaching out his good arm. Owen passed it over. Cole looked at the device, then looked back at the young Veldaran, and held it up slowly so the being could see it clearly. He pressed the input key and spoke a single word into it. "Stone." Then he pointed, carefully and without any sudden movement, at the carved stone sitting near the base of the shelf. The translation pad produced a Veldaran sound, rough, probably imperfect, but close enough. The young Veldaran's eyes moved from the pad to the stone and back to Cole. Then it spoke again, slower this time, as if it understood that something was being attempted between them and was willing to try. Owen leaned forward, watching the pad's reading. It's saying a word, something like Thal. The pad has a partial entry for it. He scrolled with his finger. An honor marker. It says given to those who act beyond personal survival. Cole was quiet for a moment. Beyond personal survival, Dana said from the wall. Meaning what exactly? Meaning, Cole said slowly, they don't give it to someone who does something brave to save themselves. They give it to someone who does something with no benefit to themselves at all. The cave was quiet. The young Veldaran was still watching Cole, its head tilted slightly, its amber eyes steady. You ran toward an explosion, Owen said, to cover a hatchling that had nothing to do with you, from a species you had never met, with no guarantee of anything. The hatchling was going to get hurt, Cole said simply. I know, but to them that's not obvious behavior. Apparently it's rare enough that they have a specific name for it. Owen looked at the stone. That stone is not a small thing, Cole. If the pad's data is right, very few of those exist. They don't make them often. Cole looked at the Vorthal sitting in the shadow by the shelf. It was not large. It was not decorated in any way that would make someone look twice at it from a distance. It was just a stone, carved with crossing lines, sitting on dark rock in the amber light of a Veldaran cave. But the weight of it, the meaning of it, sat in the air of the cave in a way that Cole could feel without being able to explain. Then the elder came back. The large Veldaran, Vorath, Cole had started thinking of it as Vorath in his head because his mind needed something to hold on to, came in from the deep passage and crossed the cave floor in that same measured, unhurried way it always moved. The 6 remaining Veldarans shifted in acknowledgement as it passed. The hatchling lifted its head and watched Vorath approach, then settled back down against Cole's side. Vorath stopped in front of Cole, closer than it had stood before. Close enough that Cole could see the individual scales along its jaw and the faint patterns beneath them, darker lines within the dark green-black, like something written in a language made of skin. It looked at Cole for a long moment. Then it spoke. The words were low and layered, and the cave seemed to hold them rather than let them go. Cole looked at Owen, who was watching the translation pad with his full attention, his lips pressed together, working through it carefully. It's saying, you were not asked, Owen said quietly, and you did not hesitate. The cave was completely silent after that. Cole sat with those words for a moment. He thought about what to say. He thought about the right diplomatic response, the kind of thing the council would want him to say, something that acknowledged the honor and opened a path forward, and represented humanity well in this first real moment of contact. Then he stopped thinking about all of that. Tell Vorath, Cole said to Owen, that the hatchling looked scared, and that was enough. Owen looked at him. Then he looked at the pad and translated it carefully, doing his best with the limited data. Vorath was still, completely still, the way only very large creatures can be still, with a weight to the stillness that smaller beings cannot quite manage. And then, from deep in its chest, came a sound, low and rolling, like distant thunder that never quite arrives. It moved through the cave, and Cole felt it in his ribs more than he heard it with his ears. Dana made a small sound beside the wall. What is that? The young Veldaran, who had been watching all of this with those bright, focused eyes, turned to the translation pad that was still in Cole's hand and tapped it once with one careful claw tip. Then it looked at Cole and made the rumbling sound again, softer, an imitation. Cole looked at the pad. Then he looked at Dana. I think, he said slowly, that's how they show respect. The rumbling from Vorath continued for a few more seconds, then faded. Vorath looked at Cole for one final moment, And then it did something none of them had expected. It turned, not back toward the deep passage, but toward the cave entrance, and it waited there, looking back over its shoulder at Cole. Dana stood up slowly from the wall. "Is it asking you to follow?" Cole looked at the entrance. Outside, through the gap in the rock, he could see a sliver of the orange Veldaran morning sky. He looked at the hatchling. The hatchling looked back at him, then looked at Vorath, then looked back at Cole, as if to say that it was already obvious what was supposed to happen next. Cole pushed himself carefully off the stone shelf and stood up. His legs were steadier than he expected. His back pulled with a dull ache but held. He picked up the Vorthal stone from the ground and held it in his good hand for a moment, feeling the weight of it, the specific gravity of a thing given without ceremony but with great seriousness. Then he slipped it into his jacket pocket and walked toward the cave entrance where Vorath was waiting. He shielded a dragon hatchling from the blast and woke to unspoken honor. Part 5. Unspoken Honor. The morning air of Veldara hit Cole the moment he stepped out of the cave. It was warm, the way the air near a fire is warm, carrying that faint sulfur smell mixed with something that was almost fresh, almost like rain, though Cole suspected it had not rained on this part of Veldara in a very long time. The sky above was that same deep orange he had seen when they first crashed, but lighter now, the way a sky gets when the day is still young and the light has not yet committed to its full strength. Vorath was already moving. The elder Veldaran walked ahead along a wide, natural path that ran beside the cave entrance and curved slowly around the face of the mountain. Cole followed, keeping a steady pace, not too close and not too far behind. The hatchling came along without being invited, trotting at Cole's left side with its head up, looking around at the morning with the easy confidence of a creature that belonged here completely. Behind Cole, he could hear Dana and Owen following at a short distance. He had not told them to come. They had simply come, the way good crew members do when something important is happening and they want to be close enough to help if needed. Nobody spoke. The path curved further around the mountain and then opened, quite suddenly, into something Cole was not ready for. The valley spread out below them like something from a story. It was wide and flat and ringed on all sides by the dark volcanic peaks of Veldara's mountain range. The floor of the valley was covered in a growth of low, tough vegetation, dark red and deep green, that somehow found a way to live in the mineral-heavy soil. Rivers of old lava, long since cooled and hardened, cut through it in smooth, dark lines. And moving through all of it, running and rolling and chasing each other across the wide open space below, were hatchlings. Dozens of them. They were every size, from very small ones that could have fit in Cole's arms to larger ones that came up to his waist. They moved in groups and alone, some chasing others, some wrestling in the low vegetation, some sitting at the edges of the cooled lava rivers and watching the water that ran alongside. Their scales caught the morning light and threw it back in flashes of green and black and the occasional streak of amber. The sound that rose up from the valley was something between a rumble and a song, layered and constant, the sound of a great many young creatures being completely alive. Cole stood at the edge of the path and looked down at all of it and did not say anything for a long time. Vorath stood beside him. The elder was looking at the valley too, but differently, the way someone looks at something they have looked at 10,000 times and never grown tired of. Then Vorath spoke. Owen stepped forward carefully, holding the translation pad, working through the words slowly. The Veldaran language was layered and difficult, and the pad's data was still incomplete, but Owen was careful, and he took his time. "It's saying," Owen began, speaking quietly, "that this valley has been closed to outsiders for 30 years. It says, a group came before, from outside. They made agreements. They used words that sounded like trust. And then they did something that broke that trust in a way that could not be repaired with more words." Cole looked at Vorath. The elder was still watching the valley below. "It says," Owen continued, "that after that the clan decided that words from outsiders meant nothing, that only actions could be read honestly. that a being who carries an agenda will always show it eventually, if you are patient enough to watch. The valley sounds rose up from below, that layered, rumbling song of the hatchlings going about their morning. And then it says, Owen paused, looking at the pad more carefully, making sure he had it right. It says that a being who shields a hatchling without being asked carries no agenda, because there is nothing to gain. There is no treaty in it. There is no negotiation in it. It is a pure action, and pure actions cannot lie. Cole let out a slow breath. Beside his leg, the hatchling sat down on the rock and looked out over the valley, its tail wrapped around its feet, perfectly content. Dana stepped up beside Cole and stood quietly for a moment, looking at the valley below. Then she said, very softly, just for Cole, 30 years. And you fixed it by running toward an explosion. I didn't fix anything, Cole said. Vorath seems to think differently. Cole looked at the Vorthal stone in his jacket pocket. He could feel the weight of it against his ribs. He thought about what it meant. Not just the diplomatic meaning, not the council report he would have to write when they got back, but the actual human meaning of it. A group of beings who had been hurt by words had watched a human act without words, and had decided that meant something. He was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke to Owen. Ask Vorath what the clan needs, not what we can offer, what they actually need. Owen looked at him, then translated. Vorath was still for a long time after the question. Then it spoke, shorter this time, just a few layered sounds. It says the clan needs to be left alone when they choose to be left alone, Owen said, and to be contacted honestly when contact is necessary. No performances, no large delegations, no speeches. Owen looked up from the pad. It says, send someone who can be quiet. Cole almost smiled. Tell Vorath we can do that. Owen translated. Vorath made the low chest rumble that Cole now recognized and turned back from the valley's edge toward the path. As it passed Cole, it slowed for just a moment, and its amber eyes held Cole's for a brief, steady second. Then it moved on, back toward the mountain, back toward the deep passages of the cave system, back into the life of the clan that had existed long before any ship from outside had ever crossed Veldara's sky. The crew spent the rest of the morning making their way back to the crash site. The Farpoint Accord was more damaged than it looked from a distance, but it was not beyond repair. While Cole sat on a flat rock nearby, still resting his arm, he watched as a group of Veldarans from the clan arrived without announcement and began working alongside Owen and the rest of the crew on the hull repairs. They did not ask for direction. They simply looked at the problem, understood it, and began solving it. The crew learned quickly to just work alongside them rather than trying to lead. By late afternoon, the ship was ready. The hatchling had been present through all of it, moving around the work site with the easy curiosity it brought to everything. But as Cole walked toward the loading ramp to board the ship, the hatchling followed only so far. It stopped at the base of the ramp and sat there, looking up at Cole with its amber eyes half open, its tail moving slowly along the ground. Cole stopped. He turned and looked down at it. He crouched, slowly, bringing himself closer to the hatchling's level. The hatchling watched him do this without moving. Cole looked at it for a moment. This small, tough, curious creature that had pressed itself against his ribs all night in a warm cave and had never once seemed afraid of him. He gave it a single, slow nod. The hatchling held his gaze for a moment longer. Then it made a sound, low and soft, and turned and walked back across the dark rock toward the mountain, not looking back, completely sure of where it belonged. Cole stood up and boarded the ship. As the Farpoint Accord lifted off from the surface of Veldara and the orange sky opened up around them, Dana came and sat in the seat beside Cole. Outside the viewport, the mountains fell away below, and the valley disappeared, and the planet became a dark, glowing shape beneath them as they climbed. Command is going to ask you, Dana said after a while, how a crew with a broken ship and no diplomatic preparation managed first real contact with a species that had refused outside communication for 3 decades. Cole leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. Tell them the ship broke, he said, and a small creature wandered somewhere it should not have, and somebody did the only thing that made sense in that moment. Dana was quiet for a little while. Outside, Veldara was becoming smaller. They're going to want more than that for the report, she said. Probably, Cole agreed. He reached into his jacket pocket and closed his hand around the Vorthal stone. It was smooth on one side and rough on the other, and the carved lines across it were deep and deliberate, made by someone who took their time. He held it and said nothing else, because some things that were true did not become more true by being explained. The hatchling had been afraid. Cole had moved. Vorath had watched. And 30 years of closed doors had opened, not because anyone had been clever or strategic or well-prepared, but because one human had not stopped to think about whether it was worth it. That was the whole story, and it fit in a jacket pocket next to a small carved stone and weighed almost nothing at all.